Hey everyone, welcome back to A Day Long Ago. Today we're pulling back the gilded curtain on one of the most documented yet mysterious daily routines in modern American history. From Trump Tower penthouses to Mar-a-Lago golf courses, from early morning social media posts to late night phone calls, we're diving deep into a day in the life of Donald Trump. What does the former president actually do from sunrise to midnight? How many Diet Cokes does he really drink? What's the truth behind his 4-hour sleep schedule? And how does someone juggle billion-dollar business deals, political strategy, and a golf obsession all in one 24-hour period? You're about to experience one complete day with Donald Trump, the businessman turned reality TV star turned president turned global phenomenon. We'll explore his morning routine at 5:30 a.m., his legendary McDonald's orders, his negotiation tactics in Trump Tower boardrooms, his afternoons on exclusive golf courses, and his late-night television watching habits that shaped American politics. This is the real daily schedule, backed by reports from aides, leaked schedules, and documented patterns from his time in and out of the White House. Before we begin, if you enjoy this deep dive into the daily routines of history's most fascinating figures, hit that like button and subscribe to A Day Long Ago for more historical and contemporary life stories. Drop a comment telling us whose daily routine you'd like to see next, from ancient rulers to modern powerhouses. Now, let's step into the world of gold-plated elevators, Mar-a-Lago clubhouses, and the man who turned his name into a global brand. The first threads of dawn barely touch the Manhattan skyline when Trump's eyes snap open in his penthouse bedroom. It's somewhere around 5:30 in the morning, though he swears he never needs an alarm. Sleep, he said many times, is for people without ambition. 4 hours, maybe 5 if the night was particularly forgiving, and he's already mentally sorting through the day's battles before his feet touch the marble floor. The bedroom itself lives somewhere between a Versailles fantasy and a Fifth Avenue fever dream. Gold leaf catches the early light, bouncing off mirrors and crystal fixtures that throw tiny rainbows across silk sheets. Everything here whispers expensive, from the carved bedposts to the custom drapery that cost more than most people's cars. Even the ceiling, hand-painted with classical scenes, seems designed to remind him every morning that ordinary rules don't apply up here. He reaches for the remote first, not the phone yet, though that'll come soon enough. 3 televisions mounted in strategic positions flicker to life simultaneously. Fox News on the center screen, naturally. The other 2 cycle through whatever's happening on the competition, though he'll tell you he barely watches them. The sound stays muted for now while he pads across the floor toward the bathroom, his mind already cataloging which talking heads are saying what about him. Because, make no mistake, the first thought every morning isn't about policy or family or even business. It's about the narrative, the story being told about Donald Trump, and whether he needs to grab the steering wheel and yank it back in his direction. The bathroom ritual takes longer than he'd ever admit in public. Hair, that famous gravity. Defying construction requires careful engineering. The process involves specific products, strategic combing, and what can only be described as architectural planning. Golden faucets gleam in the morning light as he works, the mirror offering up a face that's been on magazine covers, television screens, and political attack ads for decades. There's a particular expression he practices sometimes, that signature look, chin tilted just so, eyes narrowed in a way that photographs as confidence or threat depending on your politics. Every gesture calculated, every angle considered. Nothing left to chance when the entire world is watching and half of it is waiting for you to stumble. The shower, when he finally steps under the water, runs hot enough to fog every mirror in the room. No quick rinse for someone who spent decades branding his name across buildings and steaks and bottled water. This is thinking time, strategy time, revenge time. The day's grudges queue up behind his eyelids like passengers at airport security. Who needs to be praised today? Who needs to be put in their place? Which senator's phone call goes to voicemail? Which billionaire gets the presidential charm turned up to maximum? The water sluices away yesterday's concerns while today's battles sharpen into focus. Out of the shower, wrapped in a monogrammed robe, thick enough to double as a blanket, he returns to the bedroom where those 3 televisions continue their silent broadcast. Now he unmutes them, volume cranked loud enough that his wife, sleeping in a separate bedroom down the hall according to reports, probably hears snippets through the walls. Morning Joe on one screen, even though he claims he never watches it. Fox and Friends warming up on another. Maybe CNN for target practice. Their chirons already lined up like ducks at a shooting gallery. His phone, a device that's been called everything from a weapon to a direct line to chaos, sits on the nightstand still dark. Not yet. Television first, coffee never, because he's one of those rare humans who runs on pure electricity and spite. The morning news delivers its usual cocktail of outrage and opportunity. Somewhere a reporter is getting a fact wrong about him. Somewhere else an ally is saying something helpful but not quite helpful enough. A rival is being praised for something Trump did first, or better, or at least that's how he'll remember it in about 45 seconds when his thumbs start flying. The remote gets tossed aside. The phone, finally, comes alive in his hands. Twitter, back when he had it, was where the morning really began. Now it's Truth Social, his own platform where he can't be banned, can't be silenced, can't be told his words. Violate some faceless moderator's interpretation of community standards. The difference between Trump and every other politician who's ever existed is visible in these first waking moments. Where others would sip coffee and read briefing papers, he's already engaging in what amounts to psychological warfare. Each post carefully crafted to sound spontaneous. Each attack positioned to dominate the news cycle before most people have finished their breakfast. His thumbs dance across the screen with surprising speed for someone his age. 3 posts, 4, sometimes 5 in rapid succession. A compliment to a Fox host who said something nice last night. A jab at a Democrat whose name he'll deliberately misspell. A cryptic hint about something big coming soon. Tremendous, really. People are saying it's the biggest thing they've ever seen. The grammar bends, the caps lock roars, the exclamation points multiply like rabbits. Critics call it unpresidential. Supporters call it authentic. He calls it effective. And the engagement numbers, those little dopamine hits of likes and shares and angry responses, keep him coming back for more. Between posts, he's scrolling, reading what people say about him with the focus of a scholar studying ancient texts. Every mention gets cataloged, processed, filed away for future use. Compliments get screenshotted, insults get remembered, neutral takes get ignored. Because neutral doesn't move numbers, doesn't shift polls, doesn't make people talk. And Trump understands, perhaps better than anyone in modern politics, that being talked about is everything. Silent is forgotten. Controversial is alive. The television voices drift through the room like background music in an elevator, occasionally spiking his attention when his name gets mentioned. He's watching for the crawler at the bottom of the screen, the headlines that'll define the day's battlefield. If he sees something he doesn't like, the phone comes up again. Another post, this one calling out the network by name. Fake news, he'll type. The phrase so worn from use it's achieved the linguistic immortality of becoming both meaningless and instantly recognizable. The reporter who wrote the story will get a nickname, something cutting and simple enough to stick. Sleepy, this. Crazy, that. Failing, everything else. Branding turned into a bludgeon. Somewhere around 6:30, maybe pushing 7, a knock on the bedroom door signals the arrival of breakfast. He doesn't cook, never has, wouldn't know where to start. But he knows what he wants, and what he wants rarely changes. On the mornings when he bothers with breakfast at all, it's bacon and eggs, cooked exactly how he likes them, which means well done enough that a nutritionist would weep. Alternatively, McDonald's, that great equalizer, the fast food he genuinely loves with an enthusiasm that drives his doctors to distraction. Not this morning, though. This morning he waves off food entirely, too focused on the phone, the television, the incoming messages from aides who've learned that responding to a Trump text at 6 in the morning isn't optional, it's survival. A Diet Coke appears on a gold-rimmed coaster near the bed. The first of what will be, according to reports, approximately 12 throughout the day. The can, cold and beating condensation, gets cracked open with a hiss that sounds like starting a chainsaw. He takes a long pull, the caffeine and artificial sweetener beginning their daily dance through his system. Coffee never appealed to him. Too bitter, maybe, or too ordinary. Diet Coke became his fuel, his reward, his constant companion. Aides have described him demanding one with the press of a button, a system so efficient it became legendary. The president wants a Diet Coke, and 30 seconds later, someone's bringing him a Diet Coke. Power measured in carbonation and efficiency. The penthouse around him as morning light strengthens through the windows, reveals itself in all its maximalist glory. This isn't a home where less is more. This is a home where more is more, and more is even better. Gold fixtures everywhere, from door handles to toilet seats. Marble floors that show every footprint and require a small army to keep gleaming. Ceiling details that belong in a European palace transplanted to the middle of New York City with no trace of irony. Crystal chandeliers that probably weigh more than a compact car. Original artwork, or at least very expensive reproductions, lining walls between mirrors that multiply the opulence until you're not sure where the room ends and reflection begins. Critics have called it gaudy, tasteless, the aesthetic equivalent of nouveau riche shouting. Trump would tell you it's success made visible, the American dream rendered in gold plate and imported stone. Why be subtle when you can be unforgettable? Why whisper wealth when you can make it sing opera? Every surface here makes a statement, and the statement is always the same. I won. You didn't. Look at what winning looks like. By 7 o'clock, he's through with morning television's first wave and moves into phase 2. The phone calls. Not emails. Never emails if he can help it. Trump trusts the spoken word, the immediate back and forth, the ability to read someone's hesitation or enthusiasm in real time. The phone sits pressed against his ear while he paces the bedroom, occasionally gesturing at the television, even though the person on the other end can't see him. These early calls go to allies, advisors, and occasionally people who wake up shocked to discover the most powerful man they know is asking their opinion at 7:15 in the morning. The conversations follow a pattern. He talks more than he listens, though he's better at listening than people think, filing away information like a computer building a database. Someone tells him something useful, it goes into the mental archive. Someone tells him something he doesn't want to hear, and the charm disappears, replaced by that sharp edge everyone who's ever worked for him learns to recognize. He's testing loyalty in these calls, measuring enthusiasm, gauging whether people are with him or just near him. There's a difference, and he knows it, and he's ruthless about sorting the genuine from the convenient. Between calls, more Diet Coke, more television, more posts to Truth Social, each one landing in the digital world like a brick through a window. His critics have a routine by now, their entire morning structure built around responding to whatever he said between 6 and 8 a.m. He knows this. He's counting on it. Every outrage response, every fact check, every pearl-clutching editorial is free publicity, his name spreading across timelines and broadcasts like dandelion seeds in a windstorm. They think they're opposing him. He thinks they're amplifying him. And the engagement numbers, those beautiful, terrible engagement numbers, suggest he might be right. Somewhere around 8, the transformation begins. The robe comes off, replaced by the armor of his daily uniform. The suits, always expensive, always immaculate, cut to create a silhouette that photographs well and broadcasts authority. Navy blue or charcoal, rarely anything adventurous because Trump understands that consistency is part of the brand. The shirts, crisp white, fresh from wherever wealthy people send their laundry when regular dry cleaners aren't expensive enough. The tie, red or blue depending on the day's political temperature, knotted in a way that's somehow both traditional and aggressively long, hanging past his belt in a style that became a signature whether he intended it or not. The suit jacket, when he shrugs into it, seems to complete the transformation from sleepy morning version to public-ready version. Shoulders back, chest out, that particular stance he's held for decades in front of cameras. He checks himself in the mirror one more time, running through the mental checklist. Hair in place? Check. Tie straight? Check. That look in his eyes that's equal parts confidence and challenge? Check. Good. Time to go perform Trump, the greatest role he's ever played. The one that made him president and probably the one that'll define him long after he's gone. The elevator down from the penthouse is another gold-plated experience. Mirrors on all sides reflecting a man who's learned to live surrounded by his own image. The descent takes less than a minute, but it might as well be a time machine, transporting him. From the private sanctuary above to the very public arena below. Trump Tower, his castle, his achievement, his name in letters large enough to be seen from space, or at least from several blocks away. The lobby, all polished brass and pink marble, sees its share of tourists and tenants. But when he's moving through, the Secret Service creates a bubble of controlled chaos that parts the crowd like Moses getting aggressive with a sea. The day's schedule, printed on cream paper and handed to him by an aide whose job security depends on never making a mistake, reads like a game of Tetris played by someone who hates empty spaces. Meetings stacked on meetings, phone calls squeezed between photo opportunities, Policy briefings that'll last exactly as long as they hold his interest. The official start time says 11 a.m., that late beginning that drove his critics crazy and delighted his supporters, who saw it as evidence he worked on his own terms. But that 11 o'clock start is a fiction, or at least an oversimplification. Trump's been working since 5:30, just not the kind of work that appears on official schedules. The tweeting, the calling, the watching, the plotting, all of it counts, all of it shapes the day ahead. The office, when he finally settles behind the desk, is exactly what you'd expect and somehow still surprising. More gold, naturally. The desk itself, a monument to burnished wood and executive presence, holds the tools of modern power, phones, multiple phones, because one is never enough when the world is trying to reach you. Stacks of papers that may or may not get read depending on whether they tell him something he wants to hear. A button, famously, that once summoned Diet Cokes so efficiently it became a meme. Family photos in expensive frames, the carefully curated image of a man who values legacy and lineage. Magazine covers featuring his face, because if you've been on that many magazine covers, why not display them? Success is meant to be seen. The meetings begin, and they're unlike meetings anywhere else in corporate America. Trump doesn't do long PowerPoint presentations or committee-style consensus building. He wants the headline, the bottom line, the yes or no delivered fast enough that he can move on to the next thing. Attention span of a goldfish, his critics say. Ruthlessly efficient, his supporters counter. The truth is probably somewhere in between, a man who's bored by detail and energized by action, who'd rather make a decision and deal with consequences than spend hours in analysis paralysis. An executive enters to discuss a property deal, something about a hotel renovation or a golf course redesign. Trump listens for exactly as long as it takes to identify the core issue, then makes a call. Change this. Keep that. Fire whoever's responsible for whatever went wrong. The executive leaves with marching orders and probably a slight sense of whiplash, the meeting having lasted 7 minutes when they'd blocked out 30. Trump's already on his phone again, texting someone about something completely unrelated. His brain processing multiple streams of information simultaneously, like a computer running too many programs at once. Another meeting, this one with lawyers, because when you've lived Trump's life, you're never far from a lawyer. They discuss strategy, legal exposure, settlement possibilities. He's been sued hundreds of times, sued others nearly as often, turned the court system into just another negotiating arena. The lawyers speak in careful legalese, trying to hedge their advice with qualifications and maybes. Trump listens, nods, then ignores half of what they said in favor of his gut instinct. His relationship with legal advice is complicated, appreciating the expertise while refusing to be bound by it. After all, he'll tell you, he's won more cases than he's lost, settled when settling made sense, fought when fighting served a purpose. The scoreboard in his mind vindicates the approach. Lunch, when it finally happens, is reliably, almost comically, the same. McDonald's, often a Big Mac or two, maybe a Filet-O-Fish thrown in for variety. French fries, though he'll sometimes skip them in a gesture toward health that fools absolutely no one. A chocolate shake if the day's been particularly good or particularly bad. Comfort food performing its ancient function of making the world feel slightly less complicated. He's been mocked for this, the billionaire who eats like a teenager with his first minimum wage paycheck. But Trump's never pretended to be sophisticated about food. He likes what he likes, and what he likes is fast food, made by people who don't know who he is and therefore can't poison him. A concern he's expressed with the genuine paranoia of someone who's made a lot of enemies. The meal gets delivered to his office, spread out on the desk between documents and phones, and he eats while working, barely pausing between bites and phone calls. Ketchup on the steak if it's steak, well done to the point of requiring a steak knife sharp enough to perform surgery. Critics seize on this too, the man who eats expensive beef like shoe leather. But in Trump's mind, rare steak is an affectation, something pretentious people do to signal sophistication he's never cared about achieving. Food is fuel, nothing more, and if that fuel comes in a paper bag with golden arches, so much the better. Between bites, he's scrolling his phone again, reading reactions to his morning's posts, seeing what new controversies have erupted, checking whether his words moved the needle on whatever he was trying to move the needle on. The metric he watches isn't subtle or complex. Did people talk about it? Did the news cover it? Did his name trend? Yes to all three means success. Everything else is detail. The afternoon stretches out in a series of phone calls that blur together into a symphony of deals, disputes, and dominance. Real estate developers seeking his blessing on projects that'll carry his name, television producers pitching ideas, Republican officials updating him on fundraising or primary challenges, or whatever the party's current crisis might be. Each call follows a similar arc. The other person talks, Trump interrupts, a decision gets made, and the call ends sometimes in seconds, sometimes in meandering conversations that touch on everything from golf to cable news ratings to whatever grudge is currently occupying his considerable capacity for holding grudges. He calls people by nicknames he's invented, some affectionate, most cutting. The names stick because they're designed to stick, simple and memorable and just cruel enough to sting. Political rivals become walking punchlines, media figures become cartoons, former allies who've disappointed him become cautionary tales. The nicknames are part of the brand, the Trump touch that turns serious political discourse into professional wrestling, which is appropriate given his history with WWE. Every feud is a storyline, every comeback is a hero's journey. Every day is an opportunity to prove he's still the main character in America's favorite show, even if half the audience wishes someone would change the channel. Around mid-afternoon, assuming the weather cooperates and his mood aligns, the lure of the golf course becomes irresistible. Golf, for Trump, is many things. Exercise, though he'd dispute that his approach to the sport constitutes genuine physical activity given his preference for golf carts. Business, because deals happen on fairways and greens in ways they never could in conference rooms. Escape, a few hours away from the grind of managing an empire that spans buildings and brands and political movements. And competition because Trump approaches golf the way he approaches everything else. As a contest, he intends to win by any means necessary. The journey to whichever golf course he's favoring that day, often Mar-a-Lago when he's in Florida, or Bedminster when he's in New Jersey, involves a motorcade that turns highway driving into a military operation. Secret Service agents, when he had them as president and still has them as a former president, create moving walls of black SUVs. Local police block intersections, traffic stops, irate drivers honk at emptiness, and somewhere in the middle of the protective bubble, Trump sits checking his phone, occasionally waving at supporters who've learned to stake out his routes. The golf course itself, manicured to a degree that suggests the grass is individually inspected for imperfection, rolls out before him like a personal playground. Trump's courses are beautiful, even his harshest critics admit that. Dramatic landscapes shaped and reshaped until they're both challenging and photogenic. Clubhouses that double as country palaces, all dark wood and leather chairs, and pictures of Trump with various celebrities and world leaders covering the walls. On his courses, he's not just a player, he's the king, and everyone from the staff to the other members treats him accordingly. His golf game, depending on who's telling the story, ranges from legitimately impressive to creatively scored. Trump claims a handicap that would make him one of the better amateur golfers in America. His playing partners and golf writers who've investigated report a different story, one involving generous mulligans, flexible interpretations of where balls landed, and a scorekeeping system that seems designed to confirm he's winning rather than track actual performance. Does he cheat? His critics say absolutely. His defenders say everyone nudges their ball in the rough. Trump himself treats the question as irrelevant, a distraction from the fact that he built these courses, owns these courses, and therefore gets to define the rules on these courses. But beyond the score, which matters to him more than he'd admit, and less than his critics think, the golf course is where Trump does some of his most important work. Playing partners have included presidents and prime ministers, CEOs and celebrities. The casual setting lowers guards. The physical activity, minimal as it may be, releases endorphins. The hours away from phones and aides create space for the kind of frank conversations that determine policy and shape alliances. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe reportedly played with him 5 times, recognizing that understanding Trump meant understanding his comfort zones. After Trump's 2024 election, South Korea's president started playing golf again, a strategic decision to build rapport through 18 holes rather than formal state dinners. The round might last 3 hours, might stretch to 4 if the conversation is good or the competition particularly intense. Trump plays fast, a habit he developed in the business world and carried over to the fairway. Speed golf, his father called it, completing rounds in times that would impress cart path marshals everywhere. No lingering over putts, no lengthy pre-shot routines, just hit the ball, drive to where it landed or where it should have landed, and hit it again. The pace keeps energy high, frustration low, and allows more holes to be played before the sun sets, and reality reasserts its claim on his attention. Back at the clubhouse, sweaty despite the minimal exertion and energized by hours in the sun, Trump holds court. Members approach in careful choreography, knowing they have perhaps 30 seconds to make an impression or deliver a message. Some want selfies, which he grants with the ease of someone who's been photographed 10 million times and expects to be photographed 10 million more. Some want to discuss business, pitching ideas or seeking introductions, or simply planting seeds for future opportunities. Trump listens, files the information away, makes non-committal noises that could mean anything from "I'll call you tomorrow" to "Who are you again?" The shower after golf is another planning session, his mind moving from the course to the evening ahead. Dinner, probably, somewhere predictable. Mar-a-Lago's dining room if he's in Florida, a private area where members pay extraordinary fees for the privilege of potentially dining near him. Trump International if he's in New York, the hotel restaurant where steaks arrive exactly as he orders them, and the staff knows better than to suggest he try something new. The menu rarely varies. Steak, cooked until it's almost jerky. Shrimp cocktail, the bigger the shrimp, the better. French fries, despite what his doctor might say. A wedge salad if someone's nagging him about vegetables, though he'll ask for extra bacon and enough dressing to defeat the purpose. The evening meal is rarely solitary. Trump surrounds himself with rotating cast of family members, advisors, business associates, and whoever managed to secure an invitation through connection or persuasion or payment. The conversation flows like a river running downhill, picking up speed and debris as it goes. Stories about past glories, which grow slightly more glorious in each retelling. Complaints about media coverage, which is always unfair unless it's praising him. Theories about enemies and their motivations, sketched out in broad strokes that substitute certainty for nuance. And always, the assessment of loyalty, the unspoken question hanging over every interaction. Are you really with me, or are you just pretending until something better comes along? Dinner conversation under Trump follows unwritten rules everyone learns quickly. Laugh at his jokes, even the ones you've heard before. Agree with his assessments, or if you disagree, do it carefully enough that he thinks it was his idea. Never, ever fact-check him at the table. Never correct a story, even if you were there and remember it differently. The truth in these moments is less important than the narrative, and the narrative always positions Trump as the hero, the genius, the one who saw it coming while everyone else was blind. Challenge that at your own risk. The meal stretches, 2 hours sometimes, punctuated by his phone vibrating on the table. He checks it between courses, scrolling through messages and mentions and notifications that never stop arriving. An aide might appear with a document requiring signature. A reporter might call, and he'll take it right there at the table, shifting from private Trump to public Trump in the space of a breath, his voice changing pitch and cadence, the performance beginning again. The others at the table wait in suspended animation until he finishes, resumes his seat, and picks up whatever conversational thread he dropped. Dessert, if it happens, leans toward the same all-American simplicity that defines his other meals. Pie, maybe, apple, or cherry. Traditional flavors that require no explanation. Ice cream. 2 scoops to everyone else's 1 if the famous story is true, because even dessert becomes a hierarchy when Trump's involved. The sweetness hits his system, another sugar spike in a day fueled by Diet Coke and carbohydrates, and his mood lifts further if it wasn't already at ceiling height. Happy Trump is dangerous Trump, friends have learned, because Happy Trump makes promises and plans and commitments he may or may not remember tomorrow. After dinner, the migration to wherever he's watching television begins. During his presidency, this meant the residence at the White House, that private domain where he could shed the presidential persona and become just a guy watching cable news. Now, it might be his Mar-a-Lago quarters or a penthouse in Trump Tower, but the essential activity remains identical. The main TV gets turned on, then 2 more, creating a triptych of talking heads and chyrons and commercials he watches with the focused intensity of a pilot reading instruments. This is his real intelligence briefing, the information stream he trusts more than any official document or classified report. The remote control becomes a scepter, flipping between channels with the decisive clicks of someone who knows exactly what they're looking for. Fox News for comfort and validation. CNN for target practice and blood pressure elevation. MSNBC for the same reason some people watch horror movies, the thrill of being outraged. Local news occasionally, to see how his properties are being covered or whether his name came up in some context he needs to respond to. The volume stays loud, conversation-killing loud, the kind of audio assault that would drive most people from the room, but seems to relax him into his natural state. He watches with running commentary, talking to the television like it can hear him, like the anchors and pundits are in the room taking notes. Wrong, he'll say, when someone says something he disagrees with. True, when a friendly voice makes a point in his favor. Fake news, still, always, the phrase that refuses to die no matter how many times communication experts declare it over. If someone's being particularly critical, the phone comes out again and another post goes up, this one sharper and more personal, because it's late and the day's accumulated frustrations need somewhere to land. Between shows, between segments, during commercial breaks, the phone calls resume. These late-night conversations are different from the morning's tactical strikes. These are the real talks, the unguarded moments when Trump speaks to old friends, trusted advisors, the handful of people who've known him long enough to remember when his name wasn't synonymous with controversy. They discuss the day's battles, recount victories and defeats, plan tomorrow's strategies. His voice, no longer performing for an audience, loses some of its practiced cadence, becomes more conversational, though no less focused on the central question: are we winning? Somewhere in these evening hours, usually late, pushing past midnight, Trump will watch his own coverage with the obsessive attention of an actor reading reviews. Every mention gets analyzed, every slight gets cataloged, every compliment gets savored like expensive wine. He'll call people, wake them up despite the hour, to ask, "Did you see what they said about me on Tucker?" Or, "Can you believe what CNN is doing?" The expectation isn't really a question, it's an invitation to join him in his outrage or celebration, to validate his perception of how the media is treating him, to confirm that his read of the situation is correct. The late-night tweeting, now posting, becomes more stream of consciousness, less filtered through whatever minimal filter exists during daylight hours. Thoughts appear on Truth Social in fragments and run-on sentences, the grammar bending further as fatigue sets in, the caps lock working overtime, the exclamation points multiplying until his posts read like urgent telegrams. From a war zone, where the war is attention and he's both general and soldier, critics scream about presidential behavior or dignity. Supporters share every post, treating each one like a dispatch from their champion behind enemy lines. Trump just keeps posting, addicted to the feedback loop, unable or unwilling to step away from the device that's become an extension of his nervous system. Around 1 or 2 in the morning, maybe 3, if something particularly engaging is happening on television, or someone particularly important is on the phone, the day begins its surrender to exhaustion. Trump doesn't wind down so much as run out of fuel, the energy that's driven him for 19 hours finally hitting empty. The televisions get muted but not turned off, their light flickering across the bedroom like artificial campfires. The phone gets placed on the nightstand, still on, still receiving notifications that'll wait until 5:30 tomorrow morning, when the cycle begins again. He lies in bed, probably thinking about tomorrow's battles, replaying today's victories and defeats, planning his response to every slight, real and imagined. Sleep, when it comes, is brief, reportedly troubled. The mind that never shuts up during the day, not much quieter at night. 4 hours if he's lucky, 5 if his body insists. Some doctors have warned about the long-term effects of chronic sleep deprivation. Trump waves them off, citing his own energy as proof that conventional medical wisdom doesn't apply to everyone. 4 hours worked for Margaret Thatcher, he'll remind anyone who asks. 4 hours is enough for anyone who has too much to do to waste time on something as unproductive as sleep. The bedroom in these final moments before unconsciousness is quieter than it's been all day. The city beyond the windows has dulled to a background hum. The phones have stopped vibrating quite so urgently. Even the televisions, though still transmitting their endless stream of content, feel less demanding. In this brief window, Trump is something other than the public figure, the brand, the phenomenon. He's just a man in a bed, aging despite his protests otherwise, tired despite his claims of inexhaustible energy. alone with his thoughts in a golden room that simultaneously represents everything he's achieved and everything he's still fighting to keep. And then, inevitably, the thoughts drift to legacy. What will they say about him when the story's over? Will the buildings bearing his name stand for 100 years or crumble to dust? Will the political movement he built outlive him or dissolve the moment he's gone? Will history judge him a genius or a cautionary tale? These are the questions that haunt the small hours, the unanswered uncertainties that no amount of bravado or branding can fully quiet. He spent his entire life trying to control the narrative, to bend reality to match his version of events. But even Trump knows that the final edit isn't his to make. Sleep takes him eventually. That 4-hour window where even his legendary self-confidence can't manufacture wakefulness. The last thoughts before dreams are probably not profound or particularly self-aware. More likely they're about ratings, about polls, about who said what on which show, and whether he needs to do something about it in the morning. The man who made himself famous by proclaiming, "You're fired," drifts off still hiring and firing people in his head, still making deals, still fighting battles that exist nowhere, but in the space between his ears. The night wraps around Trump Tower like a blanket around a colossus. Traffic below has thinned to scattered taxis and delivery trucks. The millions of people who spent their day thinking about Trump, arguing about Trump, loving or hating Trump, have moved on to sleep or other obsessions. But somewhere in that golden penthouse, the man himself lies surrounded by symbols of his success, monuments to his ego, and perhaps the smallest kernel of doubt that no amount of gold leaf can quite obscure. Morning will come too soon, 5:30's alarm internal and insistent. The televisions will flicker back to life. The phone will buzz with overnight developments. The Diet Coke will appear like clockwork. And Donald Trump will do what Donald Trump has done every day for decades. Wake up and immediately start fighting, start selling, start performing the role that made him famous and infamous in equal measure. Before sleep claims him completely, one last thought might flicker across his consciousness, a rare moment of something approaching insight. All of this, the towers and the deals and the presidency and the controversies and the empire built on borrowed money and force of personality, all of it is performance. The greatest show on earth, starring himself, directed by himself, produced by himself, and reviewed by everyone. Whether they love it or hate it, they're watching. They're always watching. And as long as they're watching, Donald Trump is winning. The night settles deeper. The city sleeps. And in a bedroom that costs more than most people will earn in a lifetime, surrounded by gold and glory, and ghosts of battles past, Trump finally surrenders to exhaustion. 4 hours until the war begins again. 4 hours of peace before the chaos resumes. 4 hours that are never quite enough but always have to be. Sleep, when it finally arrives, brings dreams that are probably just variations on his waking thoughts. Crowds cheering, deals closing, enemies defeated, buildings rising with his name in letters that touch the sky. The American dream realized not once but over and over, each iteration bigger and bolder than the last. In his dreams the ratings are always perfect, the coverage always fair, the victories always complete. Reality can wait until morning. And so the day ends where it began, in that gold-plated penthouse high above, a city that never stops moving, never stops judging, never stops watching. Trump sleeps the sleep of someone who believes his own mythology, or at least has convinced himself he believes it. The difference at this point no longer matters. The performance has become the person, or the person has become the performance, and untangling one from the other would require more introspection than he's ever been willing to risk. The televisions continue their silent broadcast, casting flickering light across gold surfaces and marble floors. The phone sits dark on the nightstand, temporarily quiet, but never truly off, always ready to spring back to life with the next crisis, the next opportunity, the next battle in a war that will never end as long as Donald Trump is breathing and the world is paying attention. Somewhere in the building below, security guards patrol hallways. Cleaning crews work through the night, erasing the day's footprints and fingerprints, preparing the stage for tomorrow's performance. Outside, the city that made him and was shaped by him in return continues its endless dance of ambition and exhaustion. Everyone trying to climb their own tower, build their own brand, become their own version of someone whose name means success. But there's only one Trump Tower. Only one name that turned gilded real estate into political power. Only one man who looked at the American presidency and saw it not as public service, but as the ultimate reality show, the biggest stage, the grandest stage for the greatest performance of his life. Whether that performance is tragedy or comedy, or some uniquely American hybrid of both, is a question historians will wrestle with for decades. For now, in these quiet hours before dawn, it's simply a man sleeping in a golden bed, dreaming golden dreams, preparing for another day of being Donald Trump. The world spins on, the night deepens, and high above Manhattan, surrounded by every symbol of success except the one that matters most: peace. Donald Trump sleeps. 4 hours until it all begins again. 4 hours of silence before the storm. 4 hours that have to last because sleep, like compromise, like reflection, like doubt, is a luxury he can't afford and wouldn't take if offered. Tomorrow will bring new battles, new controversies, new opportunities to prove he's still the center of attention. Still the man everyone's talking about, still winning by the only measure he's ever truly cared about, whether people know his name. And they do. Oh, how they do. For better or worse, in love or hatred, with admiration or disgust, the entire world knows Donald Trump. That knowledge, that fame, that omnipresence in the global conversation is the real achievement, the actual victory that no bankrupt casino or failed business deal or political defeat can erase. He made himself unforgettable. He turned his name into a synonym for a particular kind of American excess and ambition. He proved that in the attention economy, any publicity really can be good publicity, as long as people keep talking. And as the night wraps around him and sleep finally fully takes hold, Donald Trump rests in the certainty that tomorrow, whatever else happens, people will still be talking, still watching, still reacting, still unable to look away from the show he's been performing for decades, the greatest show in American politics, The Trump Show. Running every day, multiple times per day, no commercial breaks, no season finales, just constant, exhausting, endlessly fascinating chaos. Let history keep watch while the man in the golden tower dreams his golden dreams, fighting his golden battles, winning his golden victories in a world where winning is the only virtue and attention is the only currency that really matters. 4 hours until dawn. 4 hours until it begins again. 4 hours of blessed quiet before the loudest voice in American politics wakes up and starts shouting, "Sleep well. Tomorrow's show starts early, and you won't want to miss a minute." Because love him or hate him, agree with him or despise everything he represents, Donald Trump understands one fundamental truth about modern America. We can't stop watching. We can't look away. And as long as we're watching, he's exactly where he wants to be, at the center of everything, impossible to ignore, larger than life, the main character in a story that refuses to end. The televisions flicker, the phone waits, the city sleeps, and Donald Trump, somewhere between dreams and plans, between past glories and future battles, rests for 4 brief hours before doing it all over again. Because that's what winners do. That's what survivors do. That's what Donald Trump has always done, will always do until the day comes when the show finally, impossibly, somehow ends. But that day isn't today. Today's show is over. Tomorrow's is already being written in his sleeping mind, tweets being composed, deals being structured, enemies being targeted, all of it queued up and ready to deploy the moment his eyes snap open at 5:30 a.m. and the cycle begins its relentless spin again. If you enjoyed this journey into the daily life of one of America's most controversial figures, take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps us create more content, exploring the lives of fascinating historical and contemporary figures. Drop a comment about what you'd like to see next. And until tomorrow night, sleep well, dream big, and maybe, just maybe, be grateful your life doesn't require 12 Diet Cokes and 4 hours of sleep to function. The end.